All righty. Welcome to everyone here tonight at our Tuesday evening speaker series. And I'm Janet Childs. I'm so honored to be here and to welcome you to this amazing event, an evening with Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine and exploring the dimensions of motivational listening. And so what I'm going to ask is that all of you put yourself on mute. If we can get everybody on mute, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. And so we'll put you on mute and just invite everyone to take a nice deep breath. And if you are watching and listening at a later time to this recording, please know that we are holding you also in our circle of support and circle of healing. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And we have a tradition on this amazing speaker series of lighting the candle. And we dedicate this candle to you, Reverend Dr. Ayleen. And we dedicate this candle to each and every one of you who have come here tonight to explore this powerful, valuable topic. And so we light the candle as that universal symbol of light, as that universal symbol of connection that we can have, and of the light that we all bring to our world, and the light that we can receive. So we're just going to put that right up there. And with every breath, my friends, just allow yourself to get here and be here. Open up your hearts and minds and experiences to this moment. And I have had the privilege of knowing and being able to be connected to our Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine. Not only is she a consummate healer, shaman, chiropractor, actor, and metaphysical explorer, she is also a druid, holder of the energy. She has also done incredible work with ceremonial rituals of healing and reclaiming. She has brought to us an incredible wisdom that comes from her many different backgrounds, both cultural and spiritual. And she is an amazing inspirer. And so talking about this topic is perfect for our wonderful Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine.
Well, thank you. It is truly a delight to be here with my community, my village, my tribe, my pack. And one of the things that we notice a lot about packs is often the communication. You know, when you have a pack of dogs and you have the leader, and let's say it's a pack of wolves, you're not going to see that leader wake up in the morning, look at all the other wolves and say, who wants to chase a deer? Who wants to chase a deer? You want to chase a deer, don't you? Come on, let's go chase a deer. When the leader rises, the pack pays attention. The pack listens. They listen not just with their ears, but they listen for the energy. They listen because the leader just rises and walks and the pack follows. And one of the things, when I was back in high school, I was asked to memorize and recite a soliloquy from Hamlet. Now, everybody else got the to be or not to be part. Oh, no, 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 no. I got the advice of Polonius to his son Laertes. Now, most people do not know the whole passage, and it's a very long one. But the thing is, this is a passage that contains this above all to thine own self be true, for then it will follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Yet there was another part of that speech that always stood out to me. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. And as I thought about the topic that, I felt called to share, I thought about that passage Give every person your ear, but few thy voice. It doesn't mean that what you have to say is not important. It doesn't mean that what you have to say doesn't matter. What it means is that we learn more, as the old saying goes, there's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Twice as much listening to what is said. Because when we do that, what we say is significantly more powerful. And the idea of motivational speaker, that is something that, we see a lot of. We see it promoted. It's like, oh, well, you're going to go and you're going to see a motivational speaker who's going to stand on the stage and who is going to be talking and relating things. And many of those things will relate. Some of them might not. And I've also found often that one of the most irritating things to me is if I'm explaining an issue to someone, and consider whether or not this has happened to you. You're explaining something going on with you, something that has depth, something that has meaning. And right in the middle of it, the person you're speaking to will go, okay, stop right there. I know exactly what your problem is. Or stop right there. What you need to do is. Anybody else irritated by that? Anybody else feel unheard? Anybody else feel as though, wait, you really don't know what the problem is. So the solution you have, as confident as you are about it, I don't think it's going to apply to me. And that's where the listening piece comes in. That is where the ability and years ago, the whole concept of active listening. And I feel that motivational listening kind of takes that to the next level because it allows someone to truly find their own answers. So let's start off with, and I would like everyone to say this to yourself in your own mind. I do not have all the answers, and I don't need to. I do not have all the answers, but I will trust the one who does. And what I mean by the one who does is the person you're talking to. Because I'm a firm believer that everyone has their own answer inside of them. They just need the right questions to reach it. Have you ever had a problem and basically you were just roaming around the house? Those of you who have pets can relate. When you're walking around the house talking to yourself and your pets are looking at you like, okay, the last of the gray cells may have hit the bug light. I'm not sure if my human is okay. But we walk around as if, that was a great part of having pets. When you live alone in a cabin, you don't feel like the crazy old lady on the mountain if at least your animals can look at you as if they're paying attention. And yet through that process, I noticed that if I talk to myself for long enough, you have that aha moment. You have that moment where you go, wait a minute. I just remembered something, or I just thought about something. Have you ever been listening to someone and you're just sort of letting them go and letting them go and letting them go? And then you ask them one question. And it could have been anything. It could have been a major question. It could have been a minor question. And all of a sudden they look at you and go, you know what? That reminded me of something. And as soon as that aha moment hits, that means that the person you are listening to has been able to find one of the questions that lead to their own answer. And it may not come all of a sudden. And, and I've talked to a lot of people who say, I don't think that I can be a spiritual counselor. And for those, going into ministry or spiritual counseling, one of the biggest concerns that I've heard is, I don't know if I'm going to know what to say. My answer is, if you don't know what to say nothing. Because that is a very, very special moment. The ability to sit with silence, your own or someone else's. And it's in that silence. And yes, it can be very uncomfortable, especially when you do believe that you have an answer for that person, when you do believe, it was interesting because I did an exercise with a group of people, and the exercise was regarding listening. And each person was given a card. Everybody was paired up, and each person was given a card. And on that card was written, I have the answer. And I instructed everyone that, one person would talk and the other person held the card. And as the person who was listening, I said, as soon as you believe you've got an answer for that person, I want you to take the card, hold it in front of your face, and hold it towards the other person. And so, people were doing this. And then I had them switch. And then I asked them what it felt like. And I was partnered with one of the people in the class. And so I was explaining my problem, and, she's like, and she was all but like, here. And so I said, okay, and we completed it. And so afterwards she came up to me and she said, but I have an answer for your problem. And I looked at her and I said, no, thank you. The look on her face was, she was like, no, I really have. And I said, no, thank you. And she became very frustrated, and I could see that she was, it was kind of escalating a little bit. So, I took her back into my office and we sat down and I said, okay, why is it that this is important to you? And she said, well, because I know what you need to do. And I know that, and I said, okay. I said, now, when I did it to you, when I held up the card to you, how did it feel? And she said, well, I did feel a little bit interrupted, but I actually know. And I looked at her and I said, well, I suppose I should tell you I completely lied about that problem. And she was like, what? I said, I made it up. It wasn't real. And she looked so hurt because, she said, I don't usually have the answer. And I felt really like I had it. I said, but the point of the exercise wasn't about anybody answering anything. It was about understanding the importance of not putting up the big sheet that says, I have the answer, before someone is complete with their expression. Now, it did take her a little bit of time to calm down from that, especially when I told her I had made up the problem completely, which actually I hadn't. I just told her that I had, because I wanted her to release her attachment to it. And also I didn't want her following me around trying to solve a problem that I had already dealt with. So the idea that when we listen, as a doctor, if somebody's coming into me, especially a new patient, and they are, I need them to let me know what it is that I can do for them, what it is that is a problem for them. And if I listen to the first 3 symptoms and then immediately start deciding, okay, I've got this. Have you ever been to a doctor's office and you really feel like, that point that they kind of check out? And maybe they look at your weight. Maybe they look at your age. Maybe they get very focused on writing stuff down. But there's that point when you almost feel like they've checked out. And that no matter what you say from that point on, and then when they do speak, it's like, well, at a certain age, or, because of your weight. No, you're not really hearing me. And listening to someone can be one of the most empowering gifts we give. Being truly present. It's not about what we say, because what we say could apply or it might not. Have you ever had somebody give you advice and you follow it and it doesn't go the way they swear it will go? And then it's like, well, you didn't do it right. There's an imbalanced relationship that sometimes is created between the counselor and the person receiving the counseling. Now, keep in mind, that person is coming to you because of the fact that they're not sure. They don't feel safe, whether it's they don't feel well in their body, their mind, or their spirit. They're coming to you with questions. And one of the hardest things we can do when somebody, especially if it's someone we care about, comes to us with questions because we want to give them an answer. We want to have the Harry Potter wand. We want to be able to have, the magic spell that brings out all things balanced. One of the things that is important, it's sort of like going back to giving someone a fish versus teaching them to fish. Giving someone a fish is easy. And then they defer their autonomy and their strength and their empowerment to you. You become the focus. The thing is, and I've had people, it's like, well, what's wrong with just handing somebody a fish? I said, okay, where did you get the fish? Well, I would have fished for it. I said, okay, how did you learn to fish? Well, I just went out there and I fished and I fished and I fished. And, I said, did you catch everything when you first started? Well, no. I said, so you had to work for it. You had to learn it. You had to acquire it. Well, yeah. I said, and now you have all the fish you want, right? Well, yeah. Do they not deserve? I said, how did it feel when you caught that fish? And they said, it's like, oh, it felt great. I said, don't they deserve to feel great? Don't they deserve to be able to say, oh my gosh, I can do this. And I can do it on my own. I've got this. And that I've got this moment, if you've ever watched a child learn to ride a bike or tie their shoes or do anything. And yeah, at first it's wobbly. At first it's, and you see a kid and it's like, look, I'll tie your shoe for you. But when you actually see a child master something, that is a magical moment. It was one of my favorite moments as a mom. Even though sometimes it was terrifying, like watching them ride the bike down the street. But then I saw them ride back and the triumph in their faces and the glowing that they had, that they knew they now possessed something that no one could ever take away. That's an important moment for someone who, especially someone who is coming in because they're feeling vulnerable, who is seeking out help. In my case, they're normally seeking out help because they're in pain, because something isn't working right. Pain can come in a lot of different forms: mental, physical, spiritual. And when you have someone in spiritual pain, it's especially important to remember this isn't just about helping them feel better, it's about helping them be better. And yet that path can't come through us. At best, we can be guides. What I feel the most important thing we are is a sacred witness. We are a witness to transformation. We are a witness to the struggle. We are a witness to the reaching a point where they want to give up. And being able to watch the moment, the aha moment, to have the patience to wait for it, to trust that it is in there, to trust that they're being guided by more than just us. Now, motivational listening can be done without a word. It can be done with open-ended questions. I mean, there's that whole joke. It's like, great, you go see a therapist or a psychiatrist. Well, how did that make you feel? It's a good question. It's a phenomenal question. In fact, it's one of the most important questions that someone can ask, that someone can explore. How did that make you feel? What does anger, if somebody says, well, I've been feeling angry. It's like, okay, what does anger mean to you? Explain that to me, please. I don't feel safe. What does safe mean to you? Because as a part of listening, we need to be on the same sheet of music as the person who is speaking. Being able to understand that, because if somebody tells me I never get angry, my first response is, that is a load of what the bull left in the barn. But I don't know what their definition of anger is. I was speaking with someone who said that they never once in their life grieved. And I said, really? And they said that they felt there was something wrong with them because they never grieved. And that was really bothersome because they were worried that if something happened to their partner, they wouldn't grieve that person and they would feel guilty about it. And I said, okay, what does grief look like to you? Can you tell me what grief is? And she said, well, grief is when everybody is screaming and crying and yelling and being angry and there's all this stuff and so she described a very intense external experience. And I said, okay, so if you weren't doing that, then you weren't grieving. And she said, well, yeah, because that's grief. And it was like, oh, okay. I said, well, remember, and she had told me about a beloved dog. And I said, I remember when my dog passed away, I was very sad. Do you remember when your dog passed away? She goes, oh God, I think about it every day. And I said, how do you feel about her? And she said, man, I miss her so much. And I remember her and sometimes I just have to sit down. I said, why? And she said, well, because the feeling of sadness sometimes gets overwhelming. Sometimes I'm okay with it. And sometimes it gets overwhelming and I think about it and it's all I can think about, and then it passes. And I said, okay, did you feel this before your dog passed? She said, well, no. I said, so this was since your dog passed. I said, so as far as I'm concerned, I said, that sounds a lot like grief. And she said, really? You mean you can grieve without yelling? You can grieve without making noise? I said, yeah. I said, now, if you want to call it something else, you can. I said, but that kind of sounds like grief to me because it wasn't before you lost your dog. It was after. It was what you experienced afterwards. And she looked at me and her eyes filled with tears. And she started to cry. And I just let her. And when she calmed down, she said, oh my God, I've been grieving my entire life. Experiences that she had because she expressed her grief in a very quiet way. But because she wasn't outward, and in fact, she was told by other people, it's like, wow, you're cold. But she wasn't comfortable expressing it in front of others. So her entire definition of grief was that external experience, but that was the only definition she had. So through listening, I really didn't tell her much of anything. I told her that, I remembered when my dog passed and how it felt, how I felt, but I didn't go into detail about that. Then when she had I could see she was starting to put the pieces together. And I said, wow, sounds like grief to me. It is the less we say, the more another person is able to explore. Because if we're talking, you guys are talking and observing and all of that stuff. And I appreciate that. And when in a situation where you're trying to help somebody not to draw something out of them, but to help them go into those places within themselves, listening is one of the most valuable ways that we can help somebody else find empowerment. Because they walk that path, but they don't feel like they're walking it alone. There's someone present, and being present, that is invaluable. We don't have to have the answers, and quite honestly, we don't. But we can help people with questions. And listening, as I said, I mentioned at the beginning that, the wolf pack, animals have instincts where, they don't just listen with their ears. They listen with their energy. They listen with their eyes. They take a look at environments. They take a look at things that are going on. They notice things. And it can be some of the most subtle things that make a difference. You notice, as a doctor, I mean, as a doctor, I automatically get, in a way, I almost feel like I'm eavesdropping, because I'll go to the mall and I'll watch somebody. It's like, okay, they've got a rotated pelvis. Okay, that person's pulled a psoas muscle. Okay, this person has done this. When I would come out to meet people who were patients for the first time, I made sure that I went out and saw them walk in, because before they said a word to me, I could listen to what their body was saying, and paying attention, not just to, what someone says, but how are they sitting? How are they making eye contact with you? Do they have something in their hands that they're fidgeting with? Do they, how are they dressed? How are they, T, wrong way, we're good. Anyway, so, looking at all of those things, seeing what you notice. As they say, the devil's in the details. If somebody is telling you, I'm fine, or if somebody is saying, I'm fine, words can be misleading. And in most cases, people will use words in order to protect themselves, in order to create a distance. I'm great. How are you? I'm okay. I'm okay. And believe me, I was the queen of verbal distraction. I could utilize that, and I knew exactly how to do it. Because if somebody was asking me questions or trying to tell me something, and it's like, you know what, I do not feel like being vulnerable to this person. So I'll go, you know what, yeah, I'm doing okay, but are you all right? I mean, you're looking a little tired. I mean, I was wondering, just by the way you're kind of sitting, is your back feeling okay? Have you been having some back issues? How's your mom doing? I know she wasn't doing very well. Oh, I was the queen of diversion. I could get people to talk about themselves in a heartbeat. Also, being an empath, I knew how to transmit. And all I had to do was connect with something in them that I knew they wanted to talk about and gently pull it forward. Now, was that a healthy thing for me to do? Absolutely not. And I've been working on not doing that. And, we have wonderful people in this community, like, our lovely Janet, who is like a dog with a bone if they think that you are not doing well. Also, our wonderful President Corey, who I had one of my most empowering moments, because I was telling everybody I was okay. I was projecting that. And it was Corey who walked up to me one day and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And she looked at me and she said, "No, you're not." And I started to cry. First, because my mask had slipped, because I thought I had that mask on solid. I thought I was controlling the communication. I also cried because of the fact that, thank God, somebody noticed. Somebody saw, because I never realized how much I wanted someone to see past that mask. Now, when you are motivational listening, part of the time you're going to be dealing with people who are masters at distraction. They're masters at saying the words that will divert. These are not the droids you're looking for. Yes, Jedi mind tricks, they're real. And that's when we look to energy. We look to what is not obvious. We look to what it is that we can notice, that that person maybe doesn't realize we're noticing. We can look to their stance. We can look to, even whether or not, if the room is kind of warm and you notice they're bundled up. Little things. Our emotions our state of mind can have a direct effect on things like our ability to tolerate body temperature. It can have a direct relationship to things like headaches and stomach troubles. Now, is it the only reason for headaches and stomach troubles? Absolutely not. But when you're dealing with someone who really has something they need to say, there's a lot of ways, the body will cry the tears that the eyes don't. The body will also tell the secrets that the mouth doesn't. And if we know to listen for the little things, maybe it's even that, when you ask someone if they're all right and they say, I'm okay, and you notice their voice goes up. See, that's one of my absolute tells. If my voice goes up, it's like, I'm fine, I'm okay. And, it's like, no, you're not. You are so not okay. But I think everybody has tells. The thing is that we have to be able to be patient. When a relationship, when we are sitting in that seat of the sacred witness, can take some time for someone to feel comfortable. It may take some time for someone to feel safe. Maybe they've shared with someone before and their trust was betrayed. So part of that listening piece, part of that motivational listening piece, which is about creating a safe environment for someone to be real, for someone to get real in what they feel. If it's an intense thing, people aren't going to do that. They're only going to let you maybe to level 1, but they're not going to let you to those deeper levels unless they feel safe enough to do so. One of the best ways that we can we don't make anybody feel anything, but that we can assist someone to reach that place of safety, that reach that place of, okay, I can be real, is by allowing them to express themselves, by letting somebody ramble about something and not creating a story, because we're very quick to want to create a story. It's sort of like, okay, when you put your fingers together and when you relax, it's like here you see, like on the screen, you just see my 2 fingers touching. But if you look at that point with soft eyes, what do you see? You see, I used to call it the little bean finger, or the finger bean. So you get that finger bean that's right between, that touches the tip of this finger and the tip of this finger. So, and that's a common thing. The reason that happens is because there is a blind spot there. When the eyes converge, there's a point right before that convergence that is literally a blind spot. The brain fills in what it believes should be there. Now, the idea of the blind spot is very important in listening, because our brains are going to do that. We will create what's in the blind spot, and maybe the blind spot is the heart of what that person is going through. But if there's that idea that if our brains are putting together, it's like, oh, okay, I know what this person's problem is. That, it's like, okay, stop right there. I know what your problem is. I know what you need to do. That is when we're in the blind spot, because we haven't reached that point past it where, okay, we can, we've got a full idea on what that is. Because what often happens is that we overlay, we want things to make sense. We want it to make sense for them, and we want it to make sense for us. I mean, I think there's probably pretty much everybody has heard somebody tell them something that made absolutely no sense. Oh, well, I did this thing. And you're like, what? That makes no sense. Why would you do that? It's that question, why? And that's one of the tricky points in listening, really listening, because our brain starts to want it to make sense. So it will create a story that kind of, it's like the person is up to this point in their discussion, and the brain will go, okay, I need this to make sense. So I'm going to take this over. Maybe it's from a childhood experience. Maybe it's from a previous relationship that you've had. If you have an issue, that you say somebody is talking to you about an issue with a partner that's similar to an issue you had with that partner, the work is to not go into that. Don't go into your own story. Don't go into your own memory. Because as soon as we do, we're not listening. As soon as, and it is instinctive that the brain wants it to make sense, and it will relate it to something that makes sense to us, which is usually an experience that we've had. So that when that person is finished sharing, by the time they're finished sharing, when it reaches that point where it's like, oh, I totally relate this to my experience. What's the first thing that most people say when someone stops talking? I know exactly how you feel. I went through the same thing. Now, the desire is to allow that person to feel as though they're not alone in it. And everything has light and shadow. Every emotion we have has both light and shadow. And every response we have has both light and shadow. It is how we apply it. It's the intention put behind it. And I totally get the idea of wanting someone to understand that they're not alone, that their experience is one that others have shared and others have made it through, that we have had that experience and therefore we can relate to them. Unfortunately, sometimes this can go through a different doorway. The message transmitted is almost never the message that's received. So when someone hears you say, it's like, you know what? I know exactly how you feel. The first thing I think is, no, you don't. And rather than bring them closer to me, it pushes them away because I automatically believe they're making assumptions about me. I go, oh, okay, this person thinks they know my situation. They don't. And nobody can. You could have a very similar situation, say the loss of a loved one. I mean, most of us here have experienced that. And if somebody says, wow, I just lost this loved one of mine, the brain clicks. We can make sense of this and overlays our experience. And oh yeah, I remember when, when I lost my, it's not about you. First thing should be, you can express, I am so sorry for your loss. Would you like to talk about it? And that is an open question where if somebody says, well, you know what? No, I really don't. The response is a smile and says, you know what? Thank you very much for letting me know what you need. So if you do not need someone to listen right now, thank you for letting me know that. Can I get you a glass of water? Yeah, maybe I could use a cup of tea. Okay, how about if I get you a cup of tea? And then to go and sit with that person and not say a doggone thing. Let them lead. Let them learn to feel safe. Yes, they know very well you've probably gone through similar experiences, but nobody goes through the exact experience. And it's not even up to us to understand their experience. It's in dealing with people who, are taking actions that we feel are not good. Maybe it's a relationship, relationships ever gone sour? Show of hands. So that idea that, you see somebody who is in that process of being in an unhealthy relationship, yet they don't want to leave it. What is the instinct? We need to get them out of this relationship. That becomes the first thing. That becomes the intention. That becomes the thought, and we stop listening. Being able to go, you know what? I'm so sorry you're in pain. Would you like, I'm happy to listen if you would like, but you don't have to. And just offering to give them a safe place to be. And they're not going to trust that safe place because they probably have had plenty of people who have said, oh, well, yeah, why don't you talk to me about it? And then as soon as they start talking about it, it's like, well, I really don't want to leave them. Then it goes into that other direction. Well, why not? This person has done this and this and this, and why wouldn't you want to leave them? And I went through the same thing, and I waited, and a horrible thing happened, and there we go. We're not listening because there's so many different layers. If somebody is in an unhealthy relationship, first off, who defines what is healthy and what is unhealthy? That person has to figure that out for themselves. They need to figure out. And to be able to give somebody a space to talk about it in whatever way they want, knowing they are not going to be judged, knowing that they are not going to be, convinced to take an action they're not ready to take. And to know that they are respected. Often people, once they realize that they are going to be respected, their autonomy is going to be respected. There's a concept in medical care, healthcare, of informed consent. Someone has to consent to receive treatment from me. If they do not consent to treatment, and it has to be informed consent, to tell them, okay, this is what we're going to be doing, this is how I'm going to do it, and you get to choose. In counseling, in guidance, I think informed consent is important. If we are telling someone something and they are not in a space where they want to hear it, somebody, and the body language will say it. If you're talking to somebody and they're leaning back, maybe they fold their arms in front of them, they refuse eye contact. You notice that they look around or look down. Maybe you see them becoming emotional. That is a denial of consent. And especially for those who are struggling in situations where maybe their choice was taken from them, maybe their choices were not respected. Maybe they've had way too many people say, stop right there. This is what you need to do. I know what your problem is. When someone gives consent, you know that because they lean in. Their eye contact is a lot more powerful. You feel that connection. You can actually feel someone bringing down their barriers. If you feel the wall up, oh, no. Not okay. We can't push past the wall. Helping someone feel better or be better. And in order to be better, they may have to go through something very hard, very difficult. It may be that the pain they're feeling is something that is ultimately going to allow them to be liberated. It's about trusting. I don't have to have the answer because I trust the one who does. I also trust that spirit is guiding them. And for those who are doing, religious counseling, spiritual counseling, that idea that this person is being guided by a consciousness way more qualified than I am, who does have the answers. My mom had a saying, I don't know what's in the big book. And she referred to her life as a big book, the entire path of her life. She said, I don't know what's in the big book, but I'll always trust the one who wrote it. And to her, that was God. And, as many people can kind of envision, that being, that consciousness in a lot of different ways. But ultimately, however that person envisions that is the one who really is going to be there and give them the tools they need. And maybe what that person needs to do is go through a very difficult, challenging time. Maybe the last thing they need is an answer. The last thing they need is to be handed a fish. Maybe the idea of going through their growth process is terrifying to them. And when people are scared, we want them to not be scared. We want them to be able to, feel confident and be happy. Sometimes it's not about being happy. Sometimes it is about being in the dark and stinky. As spiritual people, how many have been through the dark night of the soul? Is that not an unpleasant place? And while we gain by going through that, once we come out the other side, we have gifts, but it sucks. And when you're dealing with somebody who's going through something on that level, it is an instinct to try to show them the exit sign. But it's not necessarily what's best. Motivational listening is different from regular listening because it is about using your silence to allow someone else to find their answers. Because when they find their answers, those answers are their own. Those answers are the ones given to them by Spirit, placed in their hearts, hidden behind a whole load of fear. We give them a space where they can be able to say, okay, I can put my feet up under me. I'm not by myself. And when we're with somebody, it's like, I can't do this for you, but I will sit with you. I will hold this space as long as you need me to. And what that does, and the really coolest part about all of that is when we show someone and tell someone, you've got this, you can do this, I believe in you. I am fully ready, as Janet always says, to be your backup singer. I will hold you right here, but here's where the work is. I won't leave you alone, but I won't do it for you. And that can be a very scary thing. And I've had people get angry at me for it. Being a motivational listener means that even when somebody is begging you for an answer, you know that it's not what's best for them. One of the sayings that I've used with people that has so pissed folks off is, I am happy to be a part of the answer, but I cannot and I will not be the only answer. Because they really don't need that. I have my own answers and, and tons of questions and my own issues. My answers work for me because they come from in here, they come from in here, and they come from here. Everyone has the right to find their answers. Everyone has the right to have that aha moment. Everyone has the right to know what it feels like to ride a bike without the training wheels, to slowly feel that wobble stop. And then you lean in and you pedal and you feel the wind in your hair. Everybody has a right to that. That is the gift of the motivational listener. That is the gift of being able to understand no one needs my answer. They just need help with questions. For somebody to look me in the face and see in my eyes, you can do this. You've got this. I believe in you. Because maybe they don't have a lot of people who say that to them. Maybe they don't have people who acknowledge that they've overcome 100% of everything they've ever faced, which each and every one of us has. If we are here, pulse, Yeah. Pulse, breathing, touching stuff. We're here, which means you've overcome 100% of everything you've ever faced. It may not have been pretty and it may not have been the solution you wanted, but you overcame it and it made you stronger. You found your answer. The motivational listener lets other people find theirs. The motivational listener knows that that aha moment is just one single question away. And once it starts, it's like an avalanche of inspiration. It's an avalanche of possibilities. It's just about letting someone figure out those possibilities exist. We could always tell somebody, oh, yes, these possibilities exist, and here they are. But letting them find out for themselves, letting it become their truth. They don't need my truth. They don't need our truth because they have their own. And it's trusting in that, even though they're scared, even though they're terrified. You know, it is one of the hardest things we can do when someone seems vulnerable, not to go into that nurturing maternal place. Unfortunately, that's where a little thing called codependence kind of kicks in. That is the bear trap for an empath, because we can only be as happy as the least happy person in the room. And yeah, it's like, look, if you're not okay, I'm not okay, so I'm going to make you okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be pissed off. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to be angry. Because each and every one of those is that step to self-awareness. It forces us to become real. It allows us the freedom of embracing our humanity. And if nothing else, it takes a heck of a lot of pressure off of the fact that, you know, people think they have to have answers. Pay attention, observe, notice. Notice subtleties. How many people notice I'm drinking out of a Pyrex cup? And they're probably wondering, it's like, what the heck is she doing drinking out of a Pyrex cup?
Tell us that story. Tell us that story. I want to hear it.
Well, basically, you know, it's as simple as, you know, one time I was doing live streaming and I was making some tea and I didn't have time. So it's like, fine, just put the Pyrex cup in there, you know, heat up the water in the microwave, put a tea bag in it. And, you know, and I was talking on the stream and people were like, and somebody even put in the chat, it's like, Doc, is that a measuring cup? And I said, why, yes, it is. Why are you drinking out of a measuring cup? Why not? I realized it does the exact same thing as a mug. I can tell exactly how much I'm drinking. And why not utilize a tool that you have in a way that works for you, whether it makes sense to anybody else or not? When we motivationally listen, we let other people decide what their norm is. If they come up with a solution, even if it's a solution we don't like, as Janet says, put a sock in it. Let them find their path. I mean, anybody who's ever had teenagers, you know, it's like, oh my God, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this thing? And as they grow to adults, see, I always thought, well, as soon as they turn 18, my job as a parent is over. Nope. It just gets harder because I don't have the final say. When my sons were about 17, I told them, I am no longer management. I'm a consultant. And the reason I said 17 instead of 18, because I knew I'd need a year to practice that. But I became someone who listened. because when kids are young, of course, you don't touch that. Don't touch that. Don't put that in your mouth. You know, you don't know where that's been. You'll put your eye out. All of the things in this world that could damage our children. And it's our job to make sure that they're okay. But then they reach a point when the eye rolling starts, when the mom, I'm 16, don't hug me in front of my friends, that sort of thing, which is a natural process for them to grow, for them to be able to say, for them to gain the confidence. Because I remember being a teenager and I found growing up terrifying at some point. It was like, oh my gosh, I don't know the rules. I don't know how to be grown. Neither do they. But, they're going to put that bravado in. And the reason I told them I am no longer a management, I'm a consultant. It was an agreement that if they came to me with a problem, unless they asked me for a solution, I did not offer one. I would say, I know you can do this. I love you and I'm proud of you. And if you need help, let me know, but you've got this. And I can't wait to see the solution you find. Because my sons constantly complained that I was always telling them what to do. So I did that. And my oldest son looked at me and he goes, that's it? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, where's the advice? I said, you didn't ask me for it. You told me you didn't want me to do that. He goes, well, I didn't mean it now. It's like, okay, would you like my advice? And he looked at me and he said, yes. I said, okay, if I were in your situation, this is what I would do. It is one of many possibilities. If it makes sense, give it a try. If it doesn't work, then you can try something else. But what I found was that once I stopped telling, once I stopped giving advice, once I stopped, what your problem is, they talked to me more. They opened up to me more. The conversations became much more comfortable. I didn't feel like I had to drag anything out of them because I stopped pushing. And and when we talk about questions, when we talk about helping people find those questions, it's not an opportunity to, this isn't Jeopardy. We're not like rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire. It goes into that quiet place. They don't owe us any answers. They don't owe us any explanations. They don't owe us anything. We're a sacred witness, without judgment, without adding story to it, especially our own. And when we can do that, we are able to give somebody the space to learn to fish. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. So are you open to having a discussion with all of these amazing?
Absolutely.
All righty. Annie, I see you've got your hand up. Let's have a discussion. These
Actually,
were rich.
I was applauding, but I always think about the times when you started talking about, dealing with your kids and teenagers, and I always wanted to jump in and help my son with everything. And one day, he had a talk with me and he said, Mom, I need to find my own answers. I know that I come to you with stuff, but I'm going, great. Okay. I won't jump in. I won't help you, because he always calls and says, I just don't know what to do. And then he sits there like he's waiting for the advice. So I used to jump in and give, or let me give you money, or let me whatever. And he called me one day and he said, Mom, I am having a problem because I don't feel well. I only have enough money to either get the prescription or go see the doctor. I don't have the money for both. And I started to jump in and I said, I love you and I'll pay for one, you pay for it. Like, oh, wait, you don't want me to do that. I think you'll figure it out. And I love you. And I hung up the phone on him. Hardest thing I ever did, but he actually found a resolution. He called me the next day and he said, this is what I did. Here's how I figured it out. So now our conversations start with, he'll call me and he'll say, just looking for an ear tonight, Mom. You know, I just want to talk. And so I just go ahead. And I have just let him, you know, stay quiet. I stay very quiet and I let him say what he needs to say. And ends up being some really great conversations, you know, where he comes to me with his solutions and I just go, that's great. And that was one of the hardest lessons in the world to learn. I do it fine as a minister. I just don't always do it well as a parent. So thanks for that reminder, Doug.
Yeah, and sitting with the silence, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's that idea of being able to sit with the silence. It's almost like the silence gets uncomfortable. It's like, no, we need to fill this with something. Maybe I need to encourage them. Maybe this, maybe that. Take a breath. Sit with it. Just. I mean, you know, make it a game in your head. It's like, okay, the first person to speak loses. Let them sit in the silence because it was their silence. Let them end it.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
That's my weak spot, is that silence part. That just, I start to just come unglued. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It takes practice. It really does. And, you know, I suggested to one person, I said, okay, what, you know, because they said, well, I have a hard time sitting in. I said, okay, I'm going to have you practice this. I would like you to go to, you know, a place where people have opposing viewpoints to yours. You know, maybe it's a rally for a political party you don't support or something. I said, now what I want you to do is I want you to go there and for as long as you can, say nothing. And they're like, what? I said, just go. And, you know, when you know it's going to be something that provokes you, practice saying nothing. And, you know, and there's a lot of different environments where we can practice that comfort with the silence, either yours or someone else's. I developed something that I talk to a lot of couples about is I call it my DEFCON 5, you know, defense condition. And we know that DEFCON 1 is like bad. DEFCON 5 is not so bad. So in relationships or in communication, let's say somebody is very upset and they come storming in. Okay, DEFCON 5. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to interact. No, you don't need to know what's going on with me right now. I need to be by myself. Okay. DEFCON 4. I don't want to be alone, but I don't want to talk about it. So I just need you to sit next to me, hold my hand, you know, just be here, but I don't want to talk about it, but I don't want to be alone. DEFCON 3. I want to talk about it, but I don't want any responses. So I want to express myself. I need to vent, but I need you to not do anything but listen to me. DEFCON 2. I need to talk and, you know, you can ask me questions, but I don't want any advice. Just help me with the questions. DEFCON 1. I've got a problem and I need your advice. And so this couple I was talking to, and I said, so for the next week, I want you to practice, just say the number. And they said, well, do we stay at that number? I said, no, because somebody can start off at 5. Then about an hour later, they come in and they say 4. And then after a while, they say 3. And they said, well, what if we're at different places? I said, well, then meet at 4. And they came back and they said it was amazing to not have to explain because, you know, one of them was like, oh, no, you're going to talk to me. And they would follow. But, you know, it's like, no, you know, you get that space. So that was one of the suggestions. And it related to that sacred listening, that sacred witness place and providing a space for someone. And Kathleen has a hand up.
Hello. Well, I just wanted to thank you for coming up with this topic and bringing this forward, because I think, a lot of times we can make assumptions, about listening or thinking that we're listening. And yeah, as you said earlier, I think, this is like sort of taking it to a next level place, that, there's a lot of kind of reactions that people can have, and sort of what you think is kind of like the natural way of doing something, and then you just kind of open it up and said, well, no, you can do this and this and this, and it seemed like it would really lead to a deeper kind of listening. I just wanted to say that.
I mean, and I love your use of the phrase thinking that you're listening, because we think we're listening. But the reality is, if we're thinking, we're not. So that's an excellent point to bring up. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. You're welcome.
And Dottie's waving. Oh, mute. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Push on mute.
There we go.
Good.
There you are.
Hi. Well, I had a miracle this morning, and I wanted to share because it was so exciting. My son calls me every Tuesday, and so I said, "So what's going on?" He said, "Well, Mom, yesterday Dylan, his son, called me in the middle of the night, and he said, 'Dad, I just called to tell you, thank you for making me the wonderful man I am.'" And he said, and he told me, he said, he's got a great job. He's got a great woman in his life. He loves where he lives. He went out that night in a 3-piece suit, and he didn't feel out of place. And he said, all of this is because I know I'm loved, and I know I'm appreciated, and you did it. How did you make me such a wonderful man? And my son said, I want you to thank your grandma. She's the one that did it. And I thought,
Oh, that is so sweet.
it was just like, you don't know how to raise a man, You know how to raise a little boy, but to raise a man so that his son is thanking him. And then to get that kind of credit, all day I've been kind of, like you can tell, kind of weepy, like, oh boy, something I look for after all those years.
Take
And
that in, Dottie.
My grandson is turned 31, so
That's great.
and but he now is sure he's a man. And I know, Dr. Ayleen with boys and Annie with boys, it's so important that they have that when they're coming from a mom. So everything you've said, Ayleen, is so much about empowering them, but also by listening to them.
Mhm.
And as they become men, we don't say, well, remember when you were 7 and you did da-da-da. I've heard parents saying things like, I remember when you spilled coffee all over the... No, don't. Just tell them the wonderful things about them, and then they keep growing.
Yeah.
And so-
Absolutely. That is so
And so I'm
sweet.
hoping that you can, Dottie, take that into every cell of your body.
Oh,
The
yeah.
appreciation of your grandchild and also your son that said, thank your grandmother.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if any of you realize, but my son, in a course of a year, had a wife who left him and a girlfriend who died.
Yeah.
I mean, that's to
Baby.
wake up in the middle of the night with your partner dead is got to be one of the most horrible things that can happen. And now
Absolutely.
he's